Suppressor reform ignites controversy in Congress. Plus, the Ninth Circuit says nonviolent felons can be permanently disarmed. All this and more on the news update.
No, the devil's got no hold on me.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the news update. I'm contributing writer Jake Fogleman, joined as always by Reload founder Stephen Gutowski. The reload.com, of course, is where you can head on over today to sign up for our free weekly newsletter. It'll keep you up to date on all things happening in the world of gun politics and policy. This week's episode, to kick things off, we want to talk about the sort of brewing fight over the reconciliation bill moving through Congress and the piece of gun policy that's been attached to it. That's really, as of late, become a hot button issue among the gun rights community. And also tied to that is a little bit of a change of programming here for the Reload, because we were going to have someone directly involved in that fight on the show, but some scheduling stuff got in the way. So why don't you fill in our listeners, Stephen?
Yes. So there's this big fight brewing over the reconciliation deal and the parts that impact the silencers and the National Firearms Act. And we were supposed to have a Representative Kustoff, who's a Republican from Tennessee, who sits on the Ways and Means Committee and was part of crafting this language that's in the reconciliation package that got through Ways and Means. But his office told me that he has a personal issue today. He's going to be traveling and not able to do the interview. They did say that he wants to reschedule the interview. So we are hopefully going to have him on next week to discuss all this and get his view on the situation. Obviously I've talked to his office a bit on background about this, as well as a number of other people who were involved in, the back and forth over this, including Gun Owners of America, and then several other people who have knowledge of the situation, but don't want to, speak publicly on it. So I can give you guys a overview of what's going on, my understanding of it, and sort of the big dispute here. But I was hoping to be able to just get the congressman to go on record. And I'm still hoping that happens next week when he's hopefully whatever situation he's dealing with is all right. And he's able to come on the show. But, for now, I can do my best here to describe the situation, because it is a bit complex. We're dealing with reconciliation. For those who don't know what that is, it is a special budgetary process in Congress that is used because it allows the party in control of the Senate to essentially skip the 60 vote threshold that is required on most legislation. It is specific for budgetary issues. So you can pass a bill that only has majority support in the House and majority support in the Senate, 50 votes, plus a tiebreaker from the vice president in this case would work out, since Republicans control the presidency and the Senate at this point. But, it's basically just a way of doing budgetary legislating without having to get 60 votes in the Senate. And it's not a new thing. It's been around for a long time. Both parties have used it extensively throughout the years to get their budgets through almost exclusively when you're dealing with, a trifecta control of the government like we are now. And so the Republicans are trying to put together President Donald Trump's big, beautiful bill, I think he calls it, which is essentially just trying to cram a giant omnibus bill through this process. And there are a lot of hiccups, a lot of catches along the way, as you might imagine, especially with the incredibly small size of the Republican majority. I think they only have 2 votes to spare in the House on any of this, and then 3 votes in the Senate. So actually, House members for once have maybe more control than your average senator does over what happens here. But regardless, the catch with all of this, right, is that anything that's in this bill has to be budgetary. There's something called the Byrd Rule in the Senate, and they do something called the Byrd Bath, where once the House puts together this package, because it's budgetary, so it has to start in the House. right? That's how the process works with Congress. Once they put together their package and send it over to the Senate then goes through this process called the bird bath, where different senators can object to provisions in the bill and claim that they are out of order, that they're not allowed under the reconciliation process. And the main concern in that process, as far as I understand it, is that whatever provision is in this bill has to be primarily budgetary. It has to have a budgetary effect as the primary effect of it. It cannot be an ancillary effect that, we want to make this change to regulations or whatever, and we're going to justify putting it through reconciliation by saying it'll save X amount of dollars, or basically any piece of legislation is going to have some monetary effect, right? But the bird bath, the bird rule, this reconciliation process is intended and supposed to weed out anything that is getting at a purpose that is not primarily budgetary. So, and that process is governed by the parliamentarian. So sorry to start off here with something very detailed and very confusing and geeky, but this is the big thing. So the parliamentarian is going to decide whether or not a provision in the budget bill, in this reconciliation bill, ends up making it through this process. They're going to be the ones who rule on disputes between senators. Like a senator will say, "Oh, this part of this bill is not primarily budgetary. I'm objecting to it." The rule will go to the parliamentarian, and they will decide. And the parliamentarian is a fixture of the Senate that they have, despite all of the partisan fighting over the years, including nuking parts of the filibuster. The senators have been very reluctant to mess with the parliamentarians' rulings too much. Technically, they can overrule the parliamentarian, but they're extremely wary to do something like that because, again, it's viewed in the Senate as akin to nuking the filibuster completely, like getting rid of the filibuster completely, because if you just vote to overrule the parliamentarian every time they rule against you, well, you've kind of, you're setting a precedent for the other party to just do that next time they're in control, and it kind of undoes the whole process of reconciliation. Anyway, so one of the big disputes here is over what is going to make it through this parliamentarian process, this bird rule, bird bath. And so this House has to design their bill with that in mind. And there's constant disputes over that, as in addition to lots of other disputes over what should be in this bill. This is, I think, a relatively smaller question compared to like SALT deductions and things that are, I think, more likely to blow up this whole package. But one of the things that's in there that Rep. Kustoff was involved with and has been defending is a provision that would eliminate the tax on transfers of silencers, or better known as sound suppressors, to most gun rights activists. And so it would take the tax stamp from $200 to $0. When you go to buy a silencer at the store, you have to pay the National Firearms tax stamp on it. It's $200. Then you have to go through the registration process of filling out forms, submitting fingerprints, things of that nature, to show that you've paid the tax is how the NFA is designed. And so what this bill would do is eliminate that tax specifically on the transfer part and specifically on silencers and suppressors. So the NFA obviously covers more than that. It covers short barrel shotguns and rifles. It covers destructive devices, which is like cannons, basically, or explosives as well. And then machine guns too, right? And so it also has a tax not just on transfers, so like when you go to buy one, but also on making them. So that also is not included in this. But anyway, that's the provision. It would eliminate the tax on silencer transfers specifically, which would make it easier for people to buy silencers, less expensive for them to buy silencers. It wouldn't change the rest of that process, in the sense of you'd still have to go and register your silencer, and you'd still have to do the fingerprinting and so forth, which is the crux of the controversy here. But that's what's in this. It's an elimination of the tax on silencers specifically, and on just transferring them. And that is estimated to save, or cost, I guess, the government, save gun owners, cost the government, however you want to look at it, about $1.6 billion over the next 10 years. So it's about $150 million a year that they're estimating, this brought in from this NFA tax, especially in recent years, because silencers have become much more popular lately, and the processing times on them have actually dropped significantly over the last couple of years here. So there's way more silencers out there than there used to be, millions and millions of them. But anyway, that made it through Ways and Means with, I think, Ryan Fitzpatrick, the Republican from Pennsylvania, didn't vote, wasn't there for the vote on this, likely would have opposed it, I would guess, if he had taken a position on it, if he had actually taken a vote on it. And because he's one of the few Republicans that's been endorsed by like the gun control groups, Brady and Everytown and Gifford. So he's generally opposed to these sorts of measures. I don't know if there was, there may have been just a deal where he's not going to object to it, but not going to vote in favor of it, sort of thing going on there. But that gives you an idea. There is some opposition to this, even within the party itself. But once that got through Ways and Means, that's when the blowback happened. And it was primarily driven by Gun Owners of America and the National Association for Gun Rights. Although the NRA also was not fully happy with this compromise, because what the gun rights groups want, and I think GOA has even drawn up some language to this effect. I'll get in, try to explain their point of view on this. What they want, though, is full delisting, deregulation of suppressors, silencers, and also of short barrel rifles and shotguns as well. And they want to do that through the reconciliation process. And so the crux of the fight, on one hand, I think there's two issues. The first one is this procedural issue about the Byrd rule and whether or not delisting silencers and short barrel rifles complies with the regulations, like how the Byrd rule works. Because the question is whether or not the parliamentarian will say that aspect of what the gun rights groups want is a budgetary measure, or whether it's not budgetary in purpose. So, obviously, Kustoff has already said publicly that he doesn't believe that it would make it through that process. That's why they didn't include it in the deal, according to him and some of the public statements he's made. And whereas the elimination of the tax itself is something they're much more confident will make it through. And I think everybody kind of agrees on that point, that the tax part is much more likely to get through. But the dispute here is whether they should try to do the other stuff or not. GOA has some language that they put together where the idea is, even if the parliament, GOA certainly thinks, and they have a fact sheet out that talks about this and how the process works and why they believe this. They think that it'll get through the Byrd rule, that the parliamentarian would rule in their favor, and that because the NFA is itself just a tax and the registration, fingerprinting stuff is just a extension of the tax collection aspect of the NFA, that it should make it through the parliamentarian process, because it's very likely that a Democrat will object to it when it gets to the Senate. But they're fairly confident. They cite things like federal court rulings that talk about the NFA being a tax first, whereas I think Kustoff doesn't think that it'll make it through. I think his office has said, I've talked to his office, and they said they talked to a number of experts on this, the Senate Finance Committee. I did reach out to the Senate Finance Committee, and Senator Crapo is one of the sponsors of the HPA in the Senate, the Hearing Protection Act, which deregulates silencers. And they didn't get back to me with an answer on what their view of it is. So we don't know what the Senate is thinking necessarily on this, Senate Republicans in particular. And, the parliamentarian also doesn't make rulings ahead of time. Just kind of one of the interesting quirks of our system. So we don't know what the parliamentarian actually thinks. However, Kustoff's office said that they've consulted with former parliamentarian that they think has insight into what the current one believes. And they argue that, it wouldn't get through. So that's one half of it. And also they worry that if you include all of this in the same provision, that it wouldn't be workable to just strike the delisting parts. And they're concerned that the whole thing would get tossed in the bird bath, so to speak. So that's the two different points of view. That's the two different sides. GOA feels very strongly that, one, it could survive the bird bath, and two, even if it didn't, you could still get the provision that Ways and Means passed on a sort of procedural side of the fight. Then there's the political side of this. It's not just this bird rule that people are arguing over. It's also whether or not the full HPA, hearing protection, and short act, the short barrel rifle delisting, could get through the Republican caucus. As I mentioned earlier, there's Representative Fitzpatrick is kind of the obvious person who would not support something like that, and so you've already lost his vote. I think off the bat there, he seemed, maybe he was more willing to look the other way on the lesser stuff of just the transfer tax being eliminated. I don't know. I haven't seen public statements from him, so I don't want to speculate too much on his thoughts, but he didn't vote on that aspect of the bill. It was my understanding. But he may well vote against this if it comes to a floor vote, because what GOA wants to do now is amend this section of the bill through the Rules Committee. And I'm not an expert on this. I've done, some research on how this process works, but reconciliation is very complex, as you guys could probably tell, because I've been talking for 15 minutes here about this whole thing. And we aren't even through the basic controversy yet, but it's a fairly complex process. And it starts in the House and then it goes to the Senate, and you can change things along the way. So this Ways and Means vote is not final. You could change things in the Rules Committee. It's my understanding, if this gets there, the latest I've heard is that this bill is not going well so far. Doesn't mean it won't pass, right? Certainly there's a lot of incentive for the Republicans to actually get something done here, but cramming everything into one big bill has its drawbacks too, which is that you got to get everybody on the same page about all these different things. And there's a lot of competing interests here, not just in the gun area, but in so many other areas that are more central to the sort of budgetary nature of this bill. But, we've got this idea that they can amend this section of the bill through the rules process. And that my understanding is there's some risk that if they do it that way, leadership will have the option to either put it on the floor or withhold it completely. And the tax elimination would get stripped out. You could add it back in the Senate, perhaps. And there may be even more margin in the Senate on this than there is in the House, just because of how narrow the House majority is. But the fight is not over. The question, in addition to the procedural stuff, is the political will in the Republican Party for this stuff. Kustoff, by the way, has said that he does support full HPA, Hearing Protection Act. He supports that process. His argument is that it wouldn't be able to get through the bird bath, and also may not have the votes in the Republican caucus to pass as part of reconciliation. At least it might be better off as a standalone bill. The problem, of course, and I think everyone on the gun rights group side understands this, even if a lot of activists may not. This is the best shot. This process, this reconciliation process, to get the Hearing Protection Act passed or the Short Act passed. If you can convince this parliamentarian that, yes, the whole thing is a tax, and so you can kind of mess with the whole thing at once, which I don't know how the parliamentarian is going to come down on that. We don't get insight from them, but obviously that's what one of the big disagreements is. If you can get that to happen, you only need 50 votes in the Senate, and you could probably get that with a 53 vote majority. Maybe not. I mean, it might be close, but that's your best shot, because otherwise, if you just try to pass the Hearing Protection Act or the Short Act through normal order in the House and Senate, you're going to need 60 votes in the Senate, and you're not going to get that at this point. You know, we had Senator Crapo on the show to discuss that, and I think he thought you could maybe get 55, 56 for the Hearing Protection Act right now, because you need 7 Democrats, and I don't think you're going to get 7 as things stand today, especially with the way we've seen the Democrats react to the election by not really moving much on gun policy. Anyway, so the other concern here is, if I don't know exactly how this process is going to go, and that's something I want to do more reporting on to understand this a little bit better. But will you get the votes to make full silencer delisting and short barrel rifle delisting part of the reconciliation process? Or could leadership pull that aspect of it if they don't want to deal with this debate at all? You know, that's one of the things. There's a lot that could kill this bill, and I don't know if they want to, how leadership is going to react. I did reach out to them as well and haven't heard back yet, but that's the conflict. There's 2 aspects to it. There's the process aspect of, will this fit through the Senate process for reconciliation? Everyone seems confident that lowering tax would, or eliminating the tax on suppressors, silencers would. There's controversy around whether the rest of it would. Then there's the political side of it, to the other side. And that's, even if you could get it through the parliamentarian, could you get it through the House caucus? That's where I think that's where it's at. Those are the 2 disputes. And that's what I want to ask the congressman more about his view on this stuff, rather than trying to explain his view, through conversations we had. So, and I haven't talked to the congressman directly, just some of his staff, but anyway, and I've talked to, other people involved in the situation, from gun rights activists to lobbyists to everyone else. So I'm trying to get a full understanding of it. That's my best explanation. It took a very long time to get through. Oh man. Yeah. So just reconciliation is confusing and difficult process, but I think this is actually a pretty important story, just because, as I mentioned, I think it is the biggest opportunity that gun rights advocates have right now to get any of their top priorities into law, because it's very unlikely they're going to get through normal order and get through the 60 vote threshold required for, to get past the filibuster on any of these things. So this stuff really does matter. And that's probably why you're seeing so much heat around this topic. And I will say, Republicans didn't even try this last time they had trifecta control in 2017. They didn't try anything on guns and reconciliation. So, that they are trying something. Whether or not it's the right thing is the big question among gun rights activists. So
there's movement on that front, and it's a fascinating saga that underscores the political reality of trying to enact actual gun legislation versus executive orders, and why it's such a rare thing these days. But we will, of course, as you mentioned, stay on top of it, and hopefully we can get the congressman back on and schedule.
Yeah, and we'll let you know if he comes on or not. I mean, that'll be on him.
Absolutely. But outside of the halls of Congress, we also had a couple stories in some federal courtrooms across the country. The en banc Ninth Circuit this past week actually finally delivered its ruling in a nonviolent felon case. Previously, a 3-judge panel for the Ninth Circuit was one of the few courts to strike down the federal felon in possession ban as applied to a particular defendant. But the court, as it is wont to do in Second Amendment cases, took it up en banc, and the en banc court, surprise, surprise, came down and said that the law actually is totally constitutional, and there's no differentiation between nonviolent and violent felons. And so it reinstated this particular defendant's criminal charges. So pretty big deal. It still deepens the circuit split, even though it's no longer one of those few courts that was on the side of, for example, the Third Circuit in Range. But you now still have this sort of scattershot of courts on different sides of the issue and for different reasons. And I think it's still a pretty significant ruling.
Yeah, absolutely. And like you said, this creates another opportunity for a nonviolent felon case to make it to the Supreme Court, because Range now, that's forestalled because DOJ has decided they don't want a case like this at the Supreme Court, and they didn't appeal the Range decision. So that is my understanding, at least, is that's it for that case. So here's another one where there's a possibility, because DOJ won't. Now, DOJ, I would imagine if this guy tries to appeal the Supreme Court, they will probably file a brief that says, don't take this case. But it'll be up to the Supreme Court at that point, because the defendant will be the first mover here. And I don't know. It's another interesting one. This one, I think, it's certainly not as good of a case, I think, for gun rights activists or for anyone who's interested in nonviolent felons being able to regain their gun rights, because unlike Range, who lied to get food stamps, right? He lied about his income to get food stamps, and it was like 30 years ago when that happened. He hasn't been able to own a gun since. And that seems to line up very well with the contours of Rahimi, because Rahimi, they ruled that the domestic violence restraining order gun ban was kosher because it's temporary, and there was a clear finding of dangerousness in Rahimi's case, given his background and the judicial process he went through. Range, it's been 30 years. He hasn't been able to own guns, and he's clearly not dangerous. I don't think any court would try to pretend that he's dangerous. Whereas this guy in the Ninth Circuit, Duarte, I think is how you pronounce his name. Positive. Apologies if I get it wrong, but he doesn't have any violent convictions, right? But his convictions paint a very different picture than Range, because his convictions involve dealing drugs, evading police. In fact, the current conviction that he's challenging is one where he ran from the police and he threw a gun out of a car while he was being chased, right? So one really interesting question that this one raises is whether or not they would agree that that this guy is not dangerous just because he doesn't have a violent conviction. That's where I wonder where some of these justices would fall on that question, like Alito or Thomas might still think he's sufficiently dangerous. That's one interesting thing where the court has to answer the question of what exactly dangerousness is, because that's what they seem to be focused on in Rahimi. They didn't like the government's initial argument that anyone who wasn't responsible and law-abiding could be disarmed, because I think they felt that was clearly too loose of a standard, but they didn't really opine on what dangerousness means, other than just that Rahimi is clearly dangerous because he had this long history of violent offenses, including shooting at people and physically assaulting the mother of his children, right? So it's something where they kind of settled on, obviously this guy is dangerous, but they didn't get too far into what constitutes dangerousness. And so that's a question I think this case might be a less obvious call.
Yeah, certainly, though, I think the bottom line is this is not as sympathetic a case one way or another as something like a Range or the case out of the 10th Circuit where the woman was homeless at the time and wrote a bad check to get some groceries. And then that was 16 plus years ago. And now she's an employed mother and is looking for her gun rights. So there's definitely different categories in the world of nonviolent felons looking to get their gun rights back. And I think that itself is just an interesting, almost prudential or political question when the Supreme Court wants to weigh the optics of whatever cases it may or may not take. So,
yeah, and it is more of an optics question, right? Because he hasn't been convicted of anything violent,
right?
That's much as clear. And you would think that would have significant. That should be the guiding post here. But his record is one of somebody who is like a career criminal, essentially. And I just wonder what they would, where are they going to draw the line on what dangerousness means? Is it just literal violence, or do they have some other metric that they're going to go with? And that's the question I could see this case raising, perhaps, if it makes it up there.
I'll say, but we'll have to see what the Supreme Court decides to do, because we've had some trouble foreseeing a case that they are willing to take up in the very near future as they continue
they're on 14th,
kick things down the can.
14th time they've relisted the two Second Amendment cases pending, the assault weapons ban and the magazine limits. So, I don't know how much of an appetite they have for a case like this. Like I said, I think Rahimi sets up the next Second Amendment case being one that's an anti-Rahimi case, the opposite end of where the lower court has gone too far in, interpreting the government's power to regulate firearms and perhaps also is applying the dangerousness standard wrong. So we'll see.
Yeah. But on a related note, another prohibiting category under the same statute, there was a ruling that you wrote about out of the Fourth Circuit, actually dealing with, so not the domestic violence gun ban at issue in Rahimi, but it's a domestic violence misdemeanor gun ban. The one misdemeanor offense actually spelled out under the Gun Control Act that can cost you your gun rights permanently. And the Fourth Circuit in this instance, a 3-judge panel at least, said that it was constitutional to ban people with misdemeanor convictions for domestic violence from owning guns.
Yeah, and this one kind of looked at, this one was very heavily influenced by Rahimi, as you could probably expect, right? Because Rahimi is a domestic violence restraining order case, and this is a domestic violence misdemeanor case. And so the inciting reason for why the defendant is prohibited is pretty similar in that they committed some act of domestic violence. Or, in restraining order, obviously there's a lower level of due process that goes into that. And so, which actually did come up in the comparison here, but the underlying crime is the same category. And so they relied very heavily on Rahimi and argued that, basically everything that Rahimi said applies to this case. Nutter is the defendant here. And, but they did get into the one really significant distinction between Nutter and Rahimi, which is that, again, the Supreme Court emphasized in Rahimi that one of the reasons that it felt comfortable upholding that ban was that it's temporary by nature, because it's based on the restraining order being in effect. And once the restraining order is not in effect anymore, the prohibition goes away. And so that is the difference, the main difference between, the domestic violence restraining order gun ban and the domestic violence misdemeanor gun ban. Because the misdemeanor one is part of the Gun Control Act, you become a prohibited person for that. And you can, under most circumstances, you certainly can't automatically get there's not some, process where if, like the restraining order being lifted, there isn't something quite like that you have access to. And so the ban is much more permanent in nature. And that was a key point that they discussed. But while the defendant here tried to make some as applied arguments, because his domestic violence convictions, she had multiple, I believe, they were fairly old. They were from, I think, 20 plus years ago. And so he was trying to make he tried to do both facial and as applied, but I guess they ruled that he didn't do the as applied challenge properly. It wasn't raised the right way. So they didn't consider it. And they just considered the facial challenge, which meant that the way they looked at it, they argued, this prohibition isn't always permanent. For one, that was a big thing. And also they made it's kind of confusing, to be honest with you. It's a little bit where, the restraining order, the crime of possessing a gun while being under one of these restraining orders, charges for that come fairly soon after the restraining order being in place. That's what happened in Rahimi. It was pretty quick. It wasn't a very long time between the restraining order, him getting the restraining order, and him getting arrested for possessing a firearm. And so they said there's going to be circumstances like that with the domestic violence misdemeanor gun ban, where you're going to have people who are quickly charged for possession. And not everyone's case is going to be 20, 30 years down the line. And so there are some circumstances where the time frame is going to be the same as what they saw in Rahimi, was kind of what they were getting at. And then they had a couple of other arguments as well. That was their main one for why the question didn't work as a facial challenge, because there will be circumstances that are basically identical to what happened in Rahimi, which the Supreme Court obviously said was constitutional. So they also then went on to question the idea generally that it's a permanent ban, because it's not permanent for everyone. One, there's the Bipartisan Safer Communities Act added a provision for people who had committed domestic violence offenses against dating partners. So people who they didn't live with or have family who aren't family, or they didn't have children with, that sort of thing. And that provision has like a 5-year sunset to it. So there are sections of the domestic violence misdemeanor gun ban that do expire after a certain period of time if you don't reoffend, right? So that was one thing they mentioned. And then also they mentioned having your record expunged is another thing that can end the ban, the prohibition. And then also the rights restoration process, which we've talked a lot about. That came up as well. You could have your rights restored. And so the ban is not necessarily permanent for everyone. And so, that was a big part of the ruling. They got to the issue at the core difference between Rahimi and Nutter, or between those two statutes, is this idea that one is a more permanent ban than the other, but the court ruled it's not always permanent, and which does kind of leave the door open. They definitely left the door open to as applied challenges, where I guess somebody, including Nutter, I guess himself, because I think his convictions again were older. And so he was trying to get his gun rights back later in this process. But they just had argued that he didn't do the as applied challenge properly. So there may be somebody who, under an as applied challenge, can, get out of this prohibition, or that it would be unconstitutional applied to them. But on its face, they ruled that the law was okay. So I don't know, interesting case. A lot of stuff that kind of rolls off of Rahimi. These two big cases we saw this week, and that maybe gives us some more fodder to discuss. The kind of questions the court needs to answer, and maybe what they've said so far. Maybe we'll have some more on that in this weekend's members newsletter. But I think that's all we've got time for, because explaining reconciliation is such a time suck that I think that took like 20 minutes. I hope it was coherent though, and people understand the dispute going on here and why it matters so much, because I think it really does matter quite a lot in the grand scheme of things. And we'll certainly keep an eye on how this all develops and what happens with it. Ultimately, whether it makes it through. I mean, there may not be a bill at all, to be frank with you. Like, the prospects right now don't look super great for this omnibus style bill getting through all of the different factions of the GOP, but I wouldn't be surprised if it ended up turning out that way. We'll have to follow along. But certainly we will be most interested in what happens with this gun provision. And yeah, hopefully we can have the congressman on to give, I'd really like his view and his response and arguments articulated by him instead of me, right? To, what GOA has been saying. And they have been going after him very hard, accusing him of betraying them. So like it is a real strong backlash there. And so, I think it would be good to have him on. He's, the one that the center of a lot of this, and I'd like to get his point of view and hear his explanation and understanding. But so hopefully we'll have that next week for you guys. But this week we actually do have another interview that goes more to some of the recent ones we've done. This one is with a creator named Emily Stanley. You may know her better as Emily from Barnes & Noble. And so I did a little interview with her. Obviously, we do this segment trying to find other people who are doing stuff in the gun space that aligns with how we try to operate, but is outside of what we focus on. Like we focus obviously on news and policy reporting, and Emily focuses much more on concealed carry, specifically for women. So I'm going to hand it over to myself to introduce you guys to her. All right. I'm here with Emily Stanley, better known perhaps as Emily from Barnes & Noble, the recent meme that's been going around. That's quite funny, I think. Otherwise also known as Princess and a Pistol. Welcome to the show, Emily. Thank you so much for coming on.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Yeah, so this is a segment we do where we try to just go out and find people who I think do approach making gun-related media with the same sort of ideals that we put into it at the Reload, but in different topics or a different way. And so, I came across the meme, as I mentioned at the top of the show here, and that led me to your social media profiles, and I thought, this is somebody who is making some really interesting gun-related content and doing something really fascinating, and why not have her on the show and talk a little bit about it? So can you just give people a little bit of background about yourself before we get going into all that?
Yeah. So I have been creating gun content for a few years. I started when I started carrying because I didn't see the kind of content that I was looking for before I started carrying. So I just started documenting my journey and what holsters and stuff worked for me and how I would carry. And yeah, I've just slowly been plodding along doing that. And then I managed to blow up with that meme that last year, and now everyone's seen the meme.
Yes. It seems like it's gone viral maybe a couple times now, because it started back in, I guess, December was when you initially posted. And then I didn't see it until just recently. Maybe that's just because I'm getting older and becoming less up to date on what's happening on the internet, even though it's my full-time job. That's still very possible at 38 to probably slowing down a little bit on the uptake of memes. But it does seem like it's probably gone viral multiple. This happens a lot with memes now, I guess. They'll go viral on one platform and then jump to another and another, and go viral in little groups at a time.
Yeah. No, I won't even, I don't even see half the times it gets posted, but I'll just all of a sudden get an influx of 1,000 new followers somewhere random. And I'm oh, it's going viral again.
Yeah. So let me show it real quick what, the meme that we're talking about here, for anyone who hasn't seen it, and it's you in an outfit that just looks like a very lovely girly outfit, right? I guess is the contrast that people see. And on one side, you're just dressed in the outfit, nobody can tell that you're concealing a gun, and the other side you're doing what I would call a classic Filster Enigma pose. For those in the know, right? The Filster Enigma is a holster system made by this company that I've talked about before. Actually, I have one we've talked about on the show years ago when I first was trying it out. But it's very popular, and there's a Facebook group, right, where a lot of people who own them post these exact kind of pictures, the sort of concealed and then showing you that, yes, there really is a gun in this picture. And I think the comedy of it, right, comes from that is people being surprised, especially, the way you're dressed and the way you look as a smaller feminine woman, right? I think that plays into it. You got a shirt with tulips on it, right? And a skirt, like a long flowy skirt. And then there's a gun, and people don't expect that. And of course the caption is fantastic too, right? Imagine running up on little old Emily at Barnes & Noble's, and she's got something for you. So pretty high quality
meme all around, certainly. But, I saw that, and my first thought was, someone took this from the Philster Facebook group, where that's sort of a basically infamous thing that everybody does when they first join the group is take these pictures showing themselves concealing the gun. But no, then I found out, oh no, this is somebody who was, out there talking about concealed carry as in public as, we'll actually get into it. Is it a hobby? Is it a profession? You said you started doing it because you didn't find a lot of people like yourself who were making content like that, right?
Yeah. And I don't know. I don't know what category to put it in, because I started making it because I just wanted to help other women and show that you don't have to dress differently in order to protect yourself. And I've just been doing it this whole time. And recently I've started to try and figure out ways to monetize it. But I guess it's kind of in between the two, because
right.
Yeah.
Classic influencer thing, right? You starts out as a hobby, but if you get popular enough, it can be something that is kind of an income generating thing.
Yeah,
right?
maybe.
And you have, I guess right now, your most popular accounts are Instagram, where you post reels, and it's not all gun related stuff, right? There's sort of lifestyle stuff in there too, but the majority is concealed carry related. And then also you have a TikTok as well, which is actually, I'm interested in talking about that a little bit too, because we've covered a lot of Facebook, Instagram, YouTube sort of moderation practices over the years on the Reload. We haven't talked as much about TikTok, and so I do want to get into that. But so you've you just describe what your average post is, what you're trying to accomplish with when you put out a short video?
Well, so the format of a lot of my videos, specifically the Concealed Carry Outfit of the Day series, the format of that was actually inspired by formats of just regular Outfit of the Day videos I saw on TikTok.
Right.
And I was scrolling through one day and I was like, oh, these videos are really catching my attention. And I was like, I should try that format. And then so I just kind of did that, but with a gun. And it's eye-catching, because someone's moving and doing something, oh, look, I am putting on a shirt and now I have a holster on and blah, 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 blah. Just constantly movement to catch your eye, usually with some sort of trending audio or whatnot to try and boost the numbers. Mm-hmm. And TikTok as a platform itself is definitely one of the most difficult platforms to post firearms content on, which is why you will not see a lot of firearms content on that app. I take that as a challenge, which is why it's my biggest platform so far.
Interesting. Yeah. You have over 100,000 followers on there. That's a pretty big following for any social media platform. But it is interesting to see, especially because what I notice in your content between Instagram, which, is also gets a lot of complaints for clamping down pretty hard on firearms content. And TikTok is that on Instagram, you're doing this similar videos. It's a lot of the outfit of the day. You talk about how to carry, especially as a woman, there's different challenges than as a guy, especially, an average guy in America is wearing jeans or shorts with belt all the time, pretty much. A t-shirt over top of it. That's, there's challenges to concealing, but it's different for women who want to put on a lot of different kinds of outfits that don't always have belts or loose fitting aspects to it. Right. So that's a big part of what you do is just showcasing how to carry competently for women, right?
Exactly, yeah.
And then on when you do that you do it on Instagram, I see it with a lot of the actual gun in the holster. But on TikTok, that's different, right? Yes.
So I have used many different props for gun substitutes on TikTok. The one I use more often than anything else is my TV remote, which is really funny if you can see behind the scenes of me practicing drawing a TV remote from a holster, because it's not gun shaped. It's just the slim little thing that I have to try and grab out of a holster where it doesn't fit. And so there's a lot of really funny bloopers that I will probably never post, but they exist.
Well, that's an interesting thing to try and work around. I mean, so what is it that makes you not want to post the actual firearm itself? Is there a written policy for TikTok around that, or how does it work?
Yes. So TikTok has very strict guidelines, and pretty much the only thing with a gun you can get away with posting on there is if they can tell it's at a range. And if I post a range video, I have to, I always put in the caption, like, this is at a legal range in a safe and appropriate setting. I basically paste their guidelines into that. Like, this follows your guidelines, and then it usually won't get taken down, but sometimes it will get taken down because so if you show a gun and it's not in that context, they will take it down. I've had my account banned. I got it back, but that was like a year ago, so I try not to think about it.
That's very interesting. I bet. I mean, that is the problem that everyone who's making gun-related content on any social media platform faces. You know, basically the complaints are often these rules are inconsistently enforced, they're confusing, they're vague, right? And it sounds like with TikTok, it's perhaps they're even more aggressive than other platforms.
Oh, absolutely. And I think it's probably because of I'm guessing they have like AI who handles like taking videos down, because you can put up an appeal, and I have put up appeals for videos that have been taken down before. And if it is at a range, then often a real person will like view it and be like, oh yeah, that's at a range, whatever, and put it back. So I'm guessing that their programming just like sees a gun and is like, oh, nope, get rid of it. So
interesting. And so you think that's why TikTok hasn't become as nearly as popular for gun content as some of the other platforms have?
Well, yeah, it's you gotta find ways around it, and I do, and I get creative with it and make jokes about changing people's channels when you draw your TV remote and whatnot. But not everyone wants to put in the extra effort. Like, if I film a video for TikTok, I usually have to film a separate little piece where I'll do it with my real gun, and then I have to go into a separate app and edit those together, and then post one to this and that one to there. And it's just a whole other thing, which not everyone wants to do the extra work for that.
Right. And so what's your experience been like the last couple of years? I mean, it sounds like, it's growing into something maybe more serious for you, almost like a job, right? Something where that started as a hobby and now is maybe becoming more than that. But what has the reaction been that you've seen? How's the experience going?
So the reactions to gun content is always interesting. I always get the biggest reactions from the biggest variety of people if I have something going viral. So like on the average days, I'll just have like a group of people who are like, oh, I've never seen this kind of holster. Oh, you can carry like that? And that kind of content. And then if I have something go viral, it leaves the bounds of the gun community and goes to the public. And then all of a sudden there's like all these people who are like, what the heck? Like, a girl in a skirt with a gun? That's crazy. What are you gonna do? Go shoot up a church or something? And like all the crazy reactions. And it's like, hi guys, welcome to the gun world. We're normal here, I promise. And with going viral has the added fun of the death threats and whatnot. But on the average day, it's pretty chill, pretty nice. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I guess people react a lot to you aesthetically, right? The pink hair and skirt, very flowy skirts, how would you describe your style?
Oh gosh, everyone always asks me that. I never know how to respond because I have many different styles that I will wear. I do tend to lean more towards the cutesy side of things a lot of the time, but then it's also not unheard of to see me out in all black outfit or wearing camo with the tactical stuff or whatever. Like, that's not my like daily attire, but it's not unheard of. So I'm like, I don't know that I have a specific style. If I see it and I'm like, oh, that's cute, I'll wear it. So it's
definitely a departure from what you might see normally in the like gun creator content, especially for women, right? I mean, well, both really, men and women tend to have a very tactical sort of approach to things. And that's it, right?
Yeah, that's true. That is definitely basically like not tactical is my style, just general everyday woman just trying to protect herself is the survive, I guess.
Yeah. And how's the reception been inside the gun community? Like, you feel welcome there? And I mean, you went to SHOT Show this year, I saw.
Yes.
What was that like?
Well, SHOT Show was an amazing experience. I had a great time getting to meet people and connect with the brands and everything. I had no idea what to expect. Like, I'd never gone to, that was my first industry event. And I was like, straight into the fire, SHOT Show, let's go. But no, I had a great time. And it was after I had recently gone viral. So like some people were like, oh my gosh, it's you. And I actually wore the outfit while I was there at one point. And so it was just kind of fun. But no, that was
Barnes
great.
& Noble is here.
Yeah. And then like online, so many people are just so like supportive and like glad to see more women in the gun space. Yeah, I mean, obviously there's the occasional FUD who's like, oh, just put a revolver in a purse. But no, in general, though, everyone's really great. So it's been really cool to see.
Great. Awesome. And so if people want to, follow along with your content, where can they do that at?
Pretty much everywhere. So Princess and the Pistol on Instagram, TikTok, YouTube, technically Facebook because I just made an account or a page for that, but it's not much yet. And then P and the Pistol on X because you can't have a long username there.
All right, wonderful. Well, thank you so much for joining us and just giving us a little bit of insight into what you're doing.
Yeah, it was fun.
Awesome. All right, that's all we've got for you guys this week. We will see you again real soon.
No, the devil's got no